The sixth night, my own hall smelled of blood and fear, and the men I had led into 100 winters would not come past the door. I heard Master Aldous outside it, his voice pitched low the way men speak of the dying. The wound will not close. The wolf will not let us near it. If the beast turns feral before dawn, we must decide what mercy is owed a king who is no longer a king. I lay on the furs of my own chamber, and I was not a king. I was a wound that could think. The challenge rite was 6 days behind me. Van of Karlstad had come across the frozen sound with 40 warriors and a claim to my crown, and I had met him in the old circle before all the packs of the north, and I had put him down. I had held Caromir. But his last blade had opened my side to the bone, and the blade had not been clean, and something in the cut would not stop burning. My wolf would not let it be touched. That was the thing they could not understand. When Aldous came with his needles and his heated iron, my wolf rose in me and took the front of my mind, and I could not stop him. He had watched too many hands hurt me in that circle. He no longer knew the difference between a healer's knife and an enemy's. He snapped at the men who came to save me, and they went away pale, and the wound wept its foul weeping, and I burned. 6 days a man cannot sleep and cannot heal. I had begun to hear my own dead father in the corners of the room. I had begun to think Aldous was right. Then my sister Sella came in. She was the only one my wolf still knew, and she knelt by the furs and put her cool hand on my forehead, and she said, "Rune, there is a woman in Reuter." I could barely shape a word. "Bring me no more healers." "She is not a healer of the halls." Sella's voice was quick, low, the voice of someone who has argued herself into a hope she is half ashamed of. "You remember the miller's gray stallion, the one that went mad after the flood, that struck a groom's skull in and let no man in the stall for a month? They were going to put it down. She went in. Alone, no rope, no bit. By evening it was eating from her hand and letting her wash its legs. The whole river saw it." "A horse," I said. "The whole river saw it," she said again, and I understood that she had run out of everything but this. Outside the door, Aldous heard. He came in without leave, a thing no man had done to me in 12 years, because he thought me too far gone to answer for it. "My lady," he said to Sella, gentle and certain, "I have tended the alphas of this hold since before you were weaned. There is no craft in a mill girl's hands that is not in mine tenfold. If she comes here and the wolf takes her throat, you will have killed a peasant to comfort yourself, and the king will die anyway, 1 day later and with one more death on the floor." I lay between them, and I hated that he was likely right, and I hated more that I wanted her sent for anyway. When you have burned for 6 days, you will reach for anything. But it was not only that. Something older than the fever had heard my sister say there is a woman in Reuter, and had turned toward it the way a compass needle turns, without asking my leave. "Send for her," I said. Aldous drew breath to argue, and I found enough of myself to lift my head off the fur and let him see my eyes, and whatever he saw there, he closed his mouth. He bowed, stiffly, the bow of a man laying down a thing he means to pick back up, and he went to send a rider down the frozen road to Reuter in the dark. She came near dawn. I have tried in all the years since to hold that first sight of her clear, and I never can, because I was so far into the fever that the room swam. But I remember the door opening on the gray light. I remember a woman shaking snow from a plain wool cloak, small and unhurried, with a satchel of clay pots and dried things over one shoulder. I remember that the great warriors of my pack drew back from the doorway to let her pass, and that she did not seem to notice they had drawn back, because she was already looking at me, and there was no fear in her face at all. Only a kind of careful, steady attention, the way you would look at a fire you meant to tend and not be burned by. "Leave the room," she said, not to me, to all of them. Aldous made a sound. "You do not give orders in the Alpha Kings. The beast will not lie down in a room full of men who smell of iron and worry," she said, and she said it without heat, the way you'd state the weather. "You have all been afraid of him for 6 days, and he has smelled every hour of it. I cannot help him with your fear standing over me. Leave the room and take the braziers of hot iron with you. I will call if I need water." For a moment no one moved. Then Sella, God keep her, took Aldous by the sleeve and drew him out, and the warriors followed, and the door closed, and there was only the small woman and the burning king and the wolf under his skin. She set down her satchel. She did not come at me with a knife. She sat on the cold floor, an arm's length from the furs, and folded her hands in her lap and simply looked at me. My wolf came up hard behind my eyes, all teeth, ready for the next hand that reached for the wound. No hand reached. "There you are," she said softly, not to me, to him. "There you are, I know it hurts, and everyone who comes near you hurts it worse, and now you can't tell friend from knife, I know. I want to tell you what happened then, and I have never had the words for it. My wolf, that had not lain down in 6 days, that had snapped at my own sister, that had made me an animal in my own hall, my wolf went quiet the way a room goes quiet when someone you have waited your whole life for walks into it. Not cowed, not commanded, quieted. As though a hand had come to rest on a plucked string still shaking, and taken the shaking gently away. She let the quiet sit a long time. Then she moved, slowly, no sudden thing in her, and she reached out, and she laid 2 fingers against the back of my hand where it lay clenched in the fur. The burning did not stop, but for the first time in 6 days I was not alone inside it. Something spread out from where her fingers rested, cool and certain, a stillness with a shape to it, and my wolf, I felt him do it. My wolf lowered his great head and put it down. "Oh," she said, very quietly, as if she had touched something she had not expected. Her fingers went still on my hand. I looked at her and she looked at me, and for one moment before the fever took me back down I saw that she had felt it too, whatever it was, that stillness that had a shape, that had turned toward her like a needle toward the north. Her lips parted. A little color came and went in her face. Then she mastered it, whatever it was, and became a healer again and reached for her satchel and got to work. I do not remember most of that first day. I remember it in pieces, the way you remember a long fever, her voice, low and even, always there. Her hands, which never once hurt me, though she did things to that wound that should have made me scream, cleaned it, packed it, drew something from it. The wolf let her. That was the miracle Aldous never forgave. The wolf that had tried to take his hand off let this small woman lay her whole palm flat against the torn flesh, and only sighed. Once I surfaced enough to say, "You are not afraid of me." Her hands did not pause. "You are a man in terrible pain whose wolf is trying to keep him alive the only way it knows. Why would I be afraid of that? Everyone else is." "Everyone else," she said, "is afraid of what you can do to them. I am thinking about what I can do for you. It is very hard to be afraid and useful at the same time. I chose useful a long time ago." She pressed a cool cloth to my brow. "Sleep, if the wolf will let you, I will be here." And the wolf let me. For the first time in 6 days I slept. I woke to gray light again. A full day and night had gone, and the fever had broken enough that the room held still. She was still there. She had not left. She sat by the low fire she had built up herself, grinding something in a small stone bowl, and there were shadows under her eyes that told me she had not slept while I did. I watched her a while before she knew I was awake. There was nothing grand about her. A plain woman in a plain dress, her dark hair bound back simply, her hands red-knuckled from cold and work. And yet I could not look away from her, and it was not gratitude, or not only. My wolf had come up quiet again the moment I woke, and turned his whole attention toward her, the way he turned toward the moon, and I understood, lying there in the wreck of my own strength, exactly what he was telling me, and I was afraid of it in a way 6 days of dying had not made me afraid. I was a king who had long since stopped expecting a mate. I had led my pack through 3 wars. I had buried men I loved. The council had brought me daughters of allied holds for 12 years, and I had sent them all home with honor and no bond, because the bond never came, and I had made a kind of peace with the cold of that. A king does not need to be loved. A king needs to hold. And now here it was, at the worst hour of my life, in the shape of a Milltown healer who had walked up a frozen road in the dark to keep a stranger's wolf from turning feral. The bond, unmistakable, the thing my whole life had gone without. "You're awake," she said, without turning. "Don't move the side. The wound is closing, but it's a poor closing. There's still something wrong in it I can't reach yet." "What is your name?" I asked. It was the first thing I had wanted to know about anyone in a long time. She turned then, considered me. "Neve," she said. Neve, I had never said a word that felt so much like the beginning of something. "I am." "I know who you are." A small, dry warmth moved at the corner of her mouth. "The whole North knows who you are. You held the sound against Karlstad with your own body. They are singing about it in Rjoder already, badly, with a rhyme for your name that does you no credit." She turned back to her grinding. "You are the Alpha King, and I am the woman who is going to make you drink a great deal of very bitter tea. There, now we are introduced." I laughed, and the laugh pulled the wound, and I gasped. And she was up and across the room and had her hand flat on my side before I had finished, steadying it, scolding me softly, and the pain ebbed under her palm, and my wolf pressed toward her hand like a dog to a warm hearth. And I lay there and let a peasant healer scold me, and I had never in my life been so unwilling for a moment to end. She stayed. She should not have. She had a life below in Reuter, and the master healers of my own hall standing outside my door in a fury of wounded pride. But she stayed, because the wound was not right, and she was not a woman who left a thing half done. She sent one of my warriors down the road to fetch more of her herbs, and to tell whatever family she had that she was kept at the hold on the king's need. When the man came back, he came back grinning and told the hall that the healer of Reuter had no family to tell, that she had raised herself since she was a girl, tended the river folk for bread and not coin, and lived alone at the edge of the mill with a garden of physic herbs and a gray cat and nothing else. The warriors thought it a small, sad tale. I lay in my chamber and heard it through the door, and something in me turned over, slow and aching, raised herself, tended the whole river for bread, walked up a frozen road in the dark to a stranger who might have killed her and asked for nothing. She came in with the fetched herbs and found me looking at her too long and frowned. "Your color is up, fever." "No," I said. "Then stop looking at me like that and drink this." I drank it. It was, as promised, very bitter. She watched me drink every drop with the flat satisfaction of a woman who has been lied to about finished medicine before, and I found I did not mind being watched by her the way I had minded being watched by every soul for 12 years. Over the days that followed, I learned her the way you learn weather, by staying out in it. She spoke little of herself and much of the work, but the work took hours, and in the hours things came loose. That she had been a foundling left at the mill in a flood year, and the old miller's wife had raised her and taught her the herbs before she died. That she had never in her life been anywhere finer than the miller's house until she walked into my hall. That the river folk called on her for every fever and birth and broken bone, and paid her in eggs and firewood, and that she had never once turned a soul away, not the ones who could not pay, and not the ones who had spat at her the week before. "Why not?" I asked her once. It was deep night. She was changing the packing on my side by candlelight, her face gold and near. "The ones who spat at you, why heal them?" She thought about it honestly, which was one of the things I was learning about her. She never gave an easy answer where a true one would do. "Because a fever doesn't know they spat at me," she said at last. "It just knows there's a body it can burn. If I let a man die because I didn't like him, then his fever gets to decide who I am. I would rather decide that myself." She smoothed the fresh cloth down. "There, sleep." I did not sleep. I lay in the dark long after her candle was out, and she had gone to the pallet Sella had made up for her by the fire, and I listened to her breathing even out, and I thought, my whole life I have held this kingdom by being the strongest thing in it, and here is a woman who holds a whole river by being the kindest, and I did not know until now which was the harder thing to be. The court did not share my education. It found many ways to remind me, and to remind her that she did not belong. Master Aldous led it, though he was too careful to lead it where I could see. He would not enter while she worked, but he was always in the corridor when she left, and I heard the shape of it through the door more than once. The smooth, wounded, reasonable voice explaining to my steward that the closing of the wound was surely his own doing, the packing he had prescribed those first days, and that the mill girl was riding the credit of his craft, that it was unseemly, a king tended by a peasant, that the woman should be paid a fair coin and sent down the road before she got ideas above her station. And the ladies of the hold, the daughters and cousins of my warriors, who had smiled at me for years across the long table. I heard the way they went quiet when Neve passed them in the passage with her satchel, the small, cold courtesy that is worse than an open sneer. She never spoke of it to me, but I saw it land now and then. I saw her square her small shoulders before she came through my door, the way you brace before wind. And it did a thing to me I had not felt in years. It made me want very badly to hurt someone, and I could not, because you cannot fight a whole court's silence with your fists, and my fists were the only argument I had ever needed before. One evening she came in with her jaw set, and a brightness in her eyes that I had learned meant she had been given something to swallow and had swallowed it. I asked what was wrong. She said nothing was wrong and reached for the packing. "Neve, it doesn't matter. It matters to me." She stopped, looked at me, and for once the careful healer's calm cracked, just a hair, and what showed underneath was so tired and so old that it undid me. "Master Aldous suggested to your steward, in a voice meant to be overheard, that I have kept your wound from closing on purpose," she said quietly, "so as to prolong my welcome in a warm hall and eat a king's bread. He suggested that this is a common trick among low healers. He suggested I be searched before I leave in case. She looked back down at her hands. I have slept 4 hours in 7 days, keeping your wolf from tearing out the throat of anyone who touches you, including his, but it doesn't matter. Hold still. The wolf came up in me then, and this time I did not put him down. I do not remember rising. I remember Neve's hand flat on my chest, pressing me back into the furs with all her small strength, saying my name low and hard, "Rune, Rune the wound, you'll open the wound, look at me." And I remember that it was her voice and not my will that stopped me, that the wolf who would have gone through the door and through Aldous both lay back down because she asked him to, because he would not hurt her by moving when her hand said stay. I sank back, shaking. She held me until the shaking passed. "You cannot open your side to defend my pride," she said, very softly, very close. "It isn't worth your blood." "You," I said, "are worth a great deal more blood than a torn side." She went still. In the candlelight, I watched the words reach her, and I watched her not know what to do with them, and I understood that no one had ever told her such a thing before, that she had spent her whole life being the one who was worth eggs and firewood in a place by no one's fire, and that a king telling her she was worth his blood was a country she had no map for. Her eyes filled. She looked away fast and busied her hands, and said in a voice not quite steady, "The wound, please." I let her have the wound, but something had been said in that room that could not be taken back, and we both knew it. That night the thing in the wound worsened. She had known for days that something was wrong in it, a wrongness she could not name and could not reach. Now, changing the packing by the low fire while she thought me asleep, she went very still, and I heard her breath change, and I opened my eyes and saw her looking at my side with a healer's fear, the real kind, the kind that has nothing to do with pride. "What is it?" I said. She startled then because she did not lie to me even to spare me. "The flesh is closing over the top, but under it there's a dark seam. It's spreading, slowly, like a root going down instead of a wound healing up." She pressed the skin gently, and I felt a deep, cold, wrong ache far below the pain. "I've drawn poisons before. This isn't a poison. Poisons fight the body. This is." She struggled for it. "This is waiting. It's patient. It knows where it's going." She looked up at me, and for the first time since she'd walked up the frozen road, Neve looked frightened. "The blade that did this, whose was it?" "Van of Karlstead." Her face changed. "The Karlstead line, they keep a witch on the ice. Everyone this side of the Sound knows the songs." She sat back on her heels. "It's not a wound, Rune. It's a curse laid in a wound. Van couldn't take your crown in the circle, so he put a slow death in you before he fell, so that even losing he'd win, you'd hold Caromir for one more winter and rot from the inside where no healer of halls would ever think to look." Her jaw set. "That's why nothing Aldous did could touch it. He was treating a cut. This is a curse. It needs to be drawn, not healed." "And drawing a thing like that—" She stopped. "Drawing a thing like that," I said, "does what to the one who draws it?" She did not answer, which was its own answer. "Neve." "There's a way," she said low. "The old miller's wife taught me one drawn craft. You take the wrong thing into yourself through the hands, and you carry it long enough to move it somewhere it can be burned, and then you burn it before it takes root in you instead of him." She turned her hands over and looked at her own palms in the firelight as if measuring them. "It works. I've drawn moonrot from a beast once, small, a lamb. This is not a lamb. This is a curse made by a witch to kill an alpha king. I don't know if a body my size can carry that far enough to burn it. I might not." She stopped again. Squared the shoulders. "I need to think." "No," I said. She looked at me. "You will not take a curse meant for me into your own body," I said. "I have carried worse than a curse and lived. I will not spend you to buy myself a winter." And Neve, small, tired, dismissed in corridors, Neve lifted her chin and looked at the Alpha King of Caromir with a calm that I have not forgotten in all the years since, and said, "It is not your decision. It's my craft and my hands and my choice, and you have no more right to forbid me saving your life than the river folk had a right to forbid me theirs." Her voice gentled, but not the resolve under it. "I did not walk up your road to watch you rot politely through the spring, Rune. Let me do the thing I am for. I have commanded armies. I have never lost an argument I cared about winning. I lost that one. Not because she was louder, she was never louder, but because she was right, and because I could see in her face that she would do it whether I gave leave or not, and that the only choice left to me was whether she did it alone in the dark or with me holding on to her while she did." "Then not alone," I said. "Not in secret. If you do this thing, you do it before the whole court so that every soul in this hold sees what a mill girl of Rjotter is worth, and you do it with my hand in yours." Something moved in her face, surprise, and under the surprise, warmth, and under the warmth, the thing that had been growing between us since the first gray dawn, the thing neither of us had put a name to. She nodded. "All right," she said. "In the morning, when I'm rested and the light is good, before your whole court." A ghost of the dry warmth came back. "Master Aldous is going to be extremely put out." "Master Aldous," I said, "can go hang." But the night did not wait for morning, because Karlstad did not wait either. They came in the black hour before dawn, Ordo, Van's younger brother, and a dozen of the ice raiders, over the sound and up through a postern. A bribed man had left unbarred. They had heard, as everyone had heard, that the Alpha King of Caromir lay wounded and near feral and could not stand. They had come to finish what the curse was doing too slowly, and to take the crown off a dying man before he could name an heir. I heard the fighting before I understood it. A shout, iron on iron, the deep wrong sound of my own warriors dying in my own halls. And then the door of my chamber burst inward, and it was not my men. Ordo of Karlstad filled the doorway, snow and blood on him, an axe in his hand and his brother's death in his eyes. He looked at me on the furs, pale, sweated, a bandage dark at my side, a king who could not rise, and he smiled. "They said you couldn't stand," he said. "I wanted to see it, the great rune. My brothers rot in your gut and no wolf left to fight." He came into the room, unhurried, the way you come at a thing already beaten. "I'll take the crown, and I'll take her too, the little witch who's been keeping you warm." He did not finish. Neve stepped between us. "I will tell you what she did, and you will not believe a healer did it, and I did not believe it either, watching. She did not have a weapon. She had a stone mortar in her hand, the one she ground her herbs in, heavy gray river stone the size of a loaf, and she did not throw it. She waited, small and steady, as Ordo's axe came up in surprise and contempt at the woman in his way. And at the last instant she stepped inside the swing, too close for the axe to bite, and brought the mortar up under his jaw with every scrap of strength in her mill-hardened arms and her whole low body behind it. You do not expect it from someone gentle. That is the thing no raider ever expects. Ordo of Karlstad, who had killed men in 3 raids, went down like a felled tree, his jaw shattered, the axe skittering across my floor, and Neve stood over him breathing hard with the bloody mortar in her hand, between him and me, and did not step back. But there were a dozen behind him. And that was when the wolf woke. I had thought him gone, drowned 6 days in fever and curse, too weak to answer. But there are things that can wake an alpha's wolf when nothing else on earth can, and one of them is a raider stepping toward his mate with a blade. The curse still burned in my side. My body was a ruin. It did not matter. My wolf came up through all of it like the tide comes up through ice, cracking everything, and I was on my feet. I do not know how. Neve says I should not have been able to stand, and I did not stand. I rose, and the men of Karlstad who had come to butcher a dying king met instead the Alpha of Caromir with nothing left to lose and his mate at his back. I do not remember much of the fighting. I remember it as heat and noise and the taste of blood, mine and theirs. I remember that my warriors, hearing their king's roar go up in a hall they had thought held only a corpse, rallied and came pouring back through the doors. I remember that I put myself between Neve and every blade in that room, and did not once feel the curse or the wound while I did it, because the wolf was burning too bright for pain to reach me. And I remember the end of it, Ordo's raiders dead or fled or on their knees, my hall held, and me swaying in the middle of it with a sword I did not remember picking up, and the wolf's fire guttering out all at once, and the curse, and the wound, and 6 days of dying all crashing back down on me together. I went down, the floor came up, and the last thing I knew before the dark was Neve's hands catching my head before it struck the stone, and her voice, fierce and frightened and closer than my own heartbeat. "No, no, you don't. Not now, not after that, don't you dare." I woke to a hall full of light and silence. They had carried me to the great hall. I learned later Neve had commanded it, had refused to do the drawing in a shadowed chamber where the curse could hide, had said the fire must be big and the witnesses many. So I woke on a pallet by the roaring central hearth of Caromir, in the cold gray morning after the raid, and the whole court was there. My warriors, bloodied and bandaged from the night's fighting, ringed the walls, Sella white-faced at my head. Master Aldous and all his healers, drawn up stiff and offended and unable to look away. And kneeling beside me, sleeves pushed back, her plain dress dark with the night's blood and none of it hers, was Neve. "You're awake," she said. "Good. I need you awake for this. I need you to hold on to my hand and not let go however it feels, and I need you to trust me. Can you do that? The curse was a black, cold root in my side now, spreading toward my heart. I could feel it plainly, patient, going home. I did not have the strength for many words. I trust you, I said, more than I have trusted anyone in my life. Something crossed her face. I like to think it was the thing she carried with her into the fire. Then she was all healer again. She took my hand in her left. She laid her right palm flat and bare over the closed butt-rotting wound in my side. And she looked up once at the ringed and silent court at Aldous, at all the faces that had spent 7 days deciding she was a mill girl riding a healer's coattails. Watch, she said to them, not proud, just so they would not be able to say after that they had not seen. Whatever happens to me, you watch, and you remember what it cost and who paid it. And then she began to draw. I have no words good enough for it, and I have spent years trying. I felt the cold root in my side turn, felt it lift, reluctant, from the flesh it had rooted into, felt it pour, slow and wrong and alive, out through the wound and into her hand. I felt it leave me, and I felt through the hand that held mine what it did to her as it came. Her fingers clamped down on mine like a vice. The color went out of her face all at once, gray as ash. Her breath went ragged, then short, then stopped. She was not breathing, she was holding it in, the curse and the breath both, carrying it, and her whole small body began to shake with the labor of holding a thing built to kill a king. Sweat sprang out on her. A thin sound came from between her teeth. And still she did not let it root in her. She held it moving, would not let it stop and sink, dragged it hand over hand out of me and up into herself and toward the fire. And the black seam in my side pulled up and out inch by inch, while she paid for every inch. Neve, I could not bear it. I tried to pull my side away, to stop it, to take it back. Stop, give it back, it's killing you. Almost, she gritted out, the only word she could spare, and her eyes never left the fire, and her hand never lifted from my wound. The last of it came out of me in a rush like cold water, and I felt myself, all at once, well, clean. The burning of 7 days simply gone, the way a fever breaks, and you are suddenly, absurdly, yourself again. And in the same instant, Neve made a terrible sound and wrenched her right hand off my side, and thrust it into the heart of the roaring hearth fire, up to the wrist, and screamed. And out of her open palm poured a thing black and writhing into the flames, and the fire flared up violet to the roof beams and roared, and the curse of the witch of Karlstad burned. And Neve fell. She fell sideways off her knees, her hand out of the fire now and whole. The drawing spares the flesh. It is the self it spends. And she fell into me, into the king she had just saved. And her eyes were rolling white, and her breath was a thread, and she weighed, I remember thinking wildly. She weighed nothing. This woman who had just carried a king's death out of him with her bare hands weighed nothing at all. That was when the mark came. I did not know it was coming. I have told you, I had stopped expecting the bond years ago, and even in these 7 days I had felt only its shadow, the way my wolf turned toward her, the stillness under her hands. But now, with her life guttering against my chest, and my whole soul reaching after it in terror, the mate bond that had been waiting since the first gray dawn broke over both of us at once. Heat bloomed up the back of my right hand, the old mark, the Alpha's mark, that had lain dark and empty my whole life waiting for a name to fill it, heat and light, silver gold, blazing to life. And on the inside of Neve's wrist, where she had held my hand through the fire, the twin of it answered, kindling from nothing, glowing against her ashen skin. The whole court saw it. Sella's hand flew to her mouth. My warriors, hard men, went to their knees along the walls, not on command, but the way men kneel when they have seen a true thing they will tell their grandchildren about. Because there is no faking a mate mark. There is no witch's trick and no politics and no station in it. It is the plainest truth the world can speak, this one, and no other, and it was always going to be this one. The Alpha King of Caromir had been marked at last before his whole court, and the mark had chosen the foundling healer of Ruater, who lay dying in his arms from the death she had carried out of him. Neve, I had her against me. Her mark was bright and her breath was almost gone. Neve, stay, you have to stay. Do you hear me? I forbid it. No, I don't forbid it, I ask it. I have never asked anyone for anything. I am asking you stay. Her eyes found me, just barely. The corner of her mouth moved, even then, even dying, that dry warmth. I told you, she breathed, worth it. It is not worth it if it costs me you, that is the whole. My voice broke in a way no king's voice is meant to break, in front of all of them, and I did not care. Master Aldous, I roared it. You have watched a woman do a thing no healer in your halls could dream of. Now you will keep her alive, or I will burn your whole guild to the ground. Do you hear me? But it was Neve who saved Neve in the end, as she had saved everyone her whole life. With the last of her strength, she turned her marked wrist against my marked hand, pressed the two together. And I felt the bond catch and flow, felt my own strength, the ridiculous returned strength of a healed alpha, pour down through the mark into her the way the curse had poured out of me into her hand. She had emptied herself carrying my death. The bond let me pour myself back into her. Her color came up. Her breath deepened, caught, steadied. Her eyes cleared. And she looked up at me from the crook of my arm, in the light of the burning curse, with the mark of the Alpha King glowing on her wrist and the whole kneeling court behind her. And she said, wonderingly, in the small, dry voice of a foundling who was never told she was worth eggs and firewood, "Oh, it's you. It was you the whole time." "It was me the whole time," I said, and I could not see her clearly because a king does not weep in his hall, and I was weeping anyway. "It was always going to be you. Stay, and I will spend the rest of my life proving I was worth the road you walked up in the dark." She stayed. Here is the part the songs get wrong, because songs like a coronation and a cheering hall, and it was quieter than that. She was too weak to stand for 3 days. I did not leave her for any of them. I, who had ruled Caromere from that hall for 12 years, ruled it that week from a chair pulled up beside a healer's pallet, and let my warriors bring the business of the kingdom to me there, and let them see their Alpha King hold a small woman's hand while he heard their reports, and dared any of them with my eyes to find it strange. None of them did. They had knelt to the mark. More than that, they had seen her put a mortar under Ordo of Karlstad's jaw and step between their king and a dozen blades, and carry his death out of him with her bare hands. There was not a warrior in Caromere who would not have died for her by the end of that week, and they told me so, gruffly, one by one, as men do. Master Aldous came on the 3rd day. I watched him come the length of the hall, stiff and old and defeated, and I made ready to be cold to him because he had called her a mill girl and a fraud and worse in the corridors of my hold. But he did not come to me. He went to Neve. And the old man knelt down by her pallet, Aldous, who had tended the alphas of Caromere since before my sister was weaned, who had never bent his neck to anyone but a king. And he bowed his gray head to the foundling of Ruoter and said, in a voice I had never heard him use, "I have practiced the healer's craft for 40 years, and I did not know a thing you did in that hall was possible. I called you names I am ashamed of. I was a proud old fool who could not bear that the hands that saved my king were not mine. Forgive me if you can. And teach me if you will. I am too old to learn, and I would like to learn anyway." And Neve, who had every right to send him off with the cold courtesy the court had shown her, reached out her marked hand and took his, and said, "The old miller's wife taught me for bread, master. I'll teach you for less. Sit. You'll want to write this down. It's a poor craft that dies with one pair of hands." That is who she was. That is who she is. I made her my Lunar on the 1st day she could stand in the great hall of Caromere, before the packs of the north who came from every hold when word went out. Even, I am told, one silent rider out of Karlstad, sent to see for themselves that the curse had truly been burned and their design undone. She wore no crown she did not choose and no gown that made her a stranger to herself. She wore good warm wool the color of river stone, and the mark of the Alpha King bright on her wrist, and she stood beside me and looked out at the hall that had once gone silent when she passed in the corridor, and the hall did not go silent. It rose. All of them, every soul that had called her mill girl, on their feet, because a thing does not need to be commanded when it has been seen. I could end it there. The songs do, but you asked for the true tale, and the true tale is not the hall rising. The true tale is a long time after. Years on, deep in a hard winter. The kind of night that finds the old wound in a man's side even when the wound has long closed, and the curse is long ash. I woke in the black hour with the ache of it, the memory of Van's blade written in cold along my ribs, the way old wounds speak on cold nights. And before I had made a sound, before I had done more than draw a careful breath around it, Neve's hand came in her sleep without waking, and laid itself flat and warm over the old scar on my side. And the ache went out of it, the way it had gone out that first gray dawn, a stillness with a shape to it, spreading from her palm, and my wolf, old now and graying at the muzzle in my heart, put his head down. She never woke. She has done it 1,000 nights, and I do not think she has ever once known she did it. Her hands learned, that first week of dying, exactly where the hurt in me lives, and they go to it now on their own, in the dark, asking nothing, The way they went to a whole river's hurt for eggs and firewood. The way they went to a stranger's raging wolf up a frozen road because a fever does not know who it burns. I lay awake a long while that night as I had lain awake the first, with her hand warm over my oldest scar and her breath even beside me, and I thought of a proud old healer's words that a thing was not possible, and of a small dry voice saying it was you the whole time, and I understood, as I had been slowly understanding for years, that I had held Caromere all my life by being the strongest thing in it, and that the strongest thing in it had walked up a frozen road in the dark and had never once needed to raise its voice, and that I had spent 12 years waiting for the wrong kind of miracle. I moved my hand over hers on the scar in the dark and held it there. Worth it, I told her sleeping face, in the small, dry way she'd taught me, so that if she ever did wake and catch me, she would only laugh. You were worth every mile of that road, and I have the rest of my life to say so, and I mean to use all of it. She slept on, her hand over the place where a king had once been dying, keeping the old cold out the way she'd kept it out from the first, without waking, without asking, without ever once knowing she was the answer to a thing I had stopped believing had won. I did not sleep for a while. I only lay there, held and healed and no longer the loneliest thing in my own hall, and watched the moon come round the shutter and lay its silver on the mark at her wrist, and I was not a king, and I was not a wound that could think. I was hers, and she, God be thanked for the road and the dark and the flood year that left a girl at a mill, was mine.